Chapter 2 Summersea in Emelon. Sandry's great-uncle, Duke Vedrus IV, the ruler of Emelon, watched the rain fall outside the library window as first Nico, then Sandry, told the tale of the last 4 months, of Sandry's rescue, healing, and the long trip north. If he had opinions about their tale, they were locked behind his deep-set brown eyes and heavy features. Stocky, broad-shouldered, and commanding, the Duke preferred simple clothes like those he had on, a white lawn shirt, brown wool breeches, a brown wool tunic, and calf-high boots. Only the flash of gold braid at his tunic collar and hems, and the signet ring on his left forefinger, hinted that he might be wealthy. With his shaved head, hooked nose, and fleshy visage, the Duke looked like one of his own pirate-chasing captains rather than a nobleman whose line had ruled from this castle for 800 years. When they finished, he turned to look at them. "Master Nico, it was good of you to bring Sandry to me, particularly at this time of year." "The land roads weren't so bad, your grace," replied Nico, stirring his tea, "and certainly I couldn't abandon Sandry at that point." "I know I should have waited till spring, uncle," the girl added, "but I just couldn't. Hatar, it's a giant graveyard now. I couldn't stay an hour more." She was still pale and thin after her ordeal in the storeroom and weeks of recovery. Dressed in black from head to toe, she had become a small ghost. Nico's suggestion to bring her north to her father's favorite relative had been welcome. Vedrus smiled. "I understand, my dear. You don't have to apologize." Sandry returned the smile with a small, trembling one of her own. The Duke sighed and rubbed his shaved scalp. "You have presented me with a dilemma, however, if you want to stay," he said regretfully. His voice was the most elegant thing about him, smooth and velvet soft, the kind of voice that others fell silent to hear. "Do you wish to remain, or do you want to head north in the spring?" Sandry shook her head, making her twin braids fly. "I don't want to go to my Namornese relatives, if you please, uncle." The Duke sat in the window seat. "After my lady wife died, I let court functions go. My nobles socialized with one another at their homes. With no hostess, and my children all grown and married, there is no lady here I would ask to take you under her wing. You are welcome to stay as long as you desire, but this castle is a grim place for a young girl." Sandry looked down at her lap. The picture he painted was not appealing. The thought of days in these plain stone halls was a lonely one. The idea of packing and traveling to distant Namorn at any season of the year sounded far worse. She hadn't liked her Namornese kinfolk. "Then I have the solution," Nico said cheerfully. "I'm surprised you didn't see it yourself, your grace. Lady Sandry can live at Winding Circle Temple. Your nobles send their own children there. She can learn the things that she will need to move in society, and she will get an education worth having." Looking at Sandry, he explained. "Winding Circle is known throughout the Pebbled Sea as a center of learning and magic." "Magic?" Sandry thought wistfully. She had thought the magic in the world died with Parisi. "I'd like to see magic again," she whispered. "It is the obvious solution," Nico told the Duke, who looked at him sharply. "She will be close by, as safe behind those walls as she might be here. The two of you can visit whenever you like." "Sandry?" asked the Duke. She smiled tiredly. "I don't know, uncle, but surely it's worth a try." Nidra Island off the shore of Sotat. It had taken so little time for her to tell the trader council of the fate of third ship Kisubo. Out early to get in a fast cargo, it sank in the late winter storm. The 5 judges, 2 land traders, 2 sea traders, and a miminder, a mage, retired when she finished, to discuss her fate. In the judging room, Deja and her rescuer waited for their verdict. Deja was sick with hope. They might let her live among those of her relatives who were too old or too young for the hard life at sea, at one of the traders' handful of hidden cities. They might give her a new name, send her to a new family. People had gotten second chances like that. Rarely, but it had happened. "Prepare yourself for the worst," advised Nico, his eyes kind. "You know they regard lone survivors as the worst kind of luck." Deja shook her head. It wasn't that she didn't believe him. She simply didn't want to admit that he might be right. The door opened. The members of the council filed in. One, a woman, carried the bulky logbook in which the names of all trader families, vessels, and companies were recorded. Placing it on the judge's table, she opened it, leafing through the pages until she reached the one she sought. Over his or her arms, Deja couldn't tell the sex of the person in those bulky robes and veils. The Miminder carried a staff. Like any trader's staff, it was 5 feet long and made of ebony, a symbol of pride and of a trader's right to protect himself. Brass caps on both ends guarded them from wear and tear. The cap on every other staff in the room bore designs of engravings, bumps, and inlaid wire. On this staff the cap was unmarked. Seeing it, Deja began to shiver. An unmarked staff meant only one thing. As in the days when our people first carried fire, weaving, and metalwork to the non-traders, the Cax, said the chief judge, a man, so it is now. Deja Kisubo, lone survivor of disaster, we declare you to be outcast, the worst kind of bad luck, Trangshi. As Trangshi, you must bear this staff always. The Miminder held the staff out to Deja. The girl stared at it. What was the design on her staff that had sunk with her ship? Dancing monkeys, each grasping the tail of the one before it, with a wire spiral on her cap to mark her as a brand new member of the crew. This cap had no mark. It was polished, mirror bright. As Trangshi, she would never be permitted to add the signs of her own deeds to it. Numb, she gripped the wood and took it from the Miminder. Your name is marked in the books of our people, the chief judge continued. You are forbidden to speak, touch, or write to traders. This is to protect them from you. If you do not wish others to catch your bad luck, do the right thing. Stay away from them. The woman with the logbook inked the tip of her brush and began to write, putting down Deja's new status for all traders to know. You don't have to do this, Nico protested to the judges. You have rights to cleanse her luck, rights to make an orphan newborn to a new family, blameless of everything that has gone before. The Miminder tucked yellow-gloved hands into wide yellow sleeves. Deja could just barely see eyes behind the thin saffron veil. We made this choice after taking the omens. I placed sacred oil and my own blood on a hot brass dish and read the signs for her future. Her fate is to be Trangshi. There is nothing you can say to change that, Nickler and Goldeye. It's all right, Deja whispered to Nico. They just want to keep my bad luck from ruining anyone else. I understand. Her rescuer glared at the judges and tucked Deja's arm in his. I'm taking her to Winding Circle Temple, he told the council, his dark eyes sparkling with anger. They'll appreciate her, with or without trader luck. In Sotat. On their first night outside the walls of Hajra, Nico and Briar slept on the ground at a trader camp, the welcome guests of a southbound caravan. On the second night they stopped at a wayside inn. Briar was inspecting the room that Nico had taken for him, and considering a raid on the kitchen, when Nico called. Would you come here? I have some shirts I think will fit you. Unsuspecting, the boy went into Nico's room, to be brought up short by the sight of a large metal tub filled with hot water. Next to it was a stool with fresh clothes, a scrub sponge, towels, and soap on top. Hop in, Nico said pleasantly. The landlady says you don't sleep in one of her beds until you've bathed. I have to admit I would welcome the change myself. Briar started to back up. That stuff's unhealthy, he informed Nico. Maybe you wouldn't be so bony if you stopped doing this all the time. Strong arms grabbed him. A hostler had been standing behind the half-open door. My thinness has nothing to do with bathing, Nico retorted. Do you undress yourself, or must we do it for you? In the end, it took him and 3 hostlers to give Briar a thorough scrubbing with hot water and soap. The boy's curses, in 5 different languages, left Nico unmoved, though the hostlers were impressed. I never thought a person could do all them things, one of them said to another. They can't, leastways not all at once, replied his friend. Briar was silent all the way downstairs. Only the sight of the loaded supper table thawed him, and that just a bit. Soon as we're out of Sotat, me and you part ways, he told Nico. Even the street guard only tortures folks when they've done something. You'll do as you wish, of course, Nico replied, sitting. Beef or chicken? Both, and some of that yellow cheese. It just seems a pity, the man said, handing over the cheese plate. From a pocket in his overrobe he drew out a handful of wilting plants and put them on the table. These fell out of your clothes. This, he tapped a leafy stem topped with a small lilac flower, I believe is thyme. I don't recognize the others. Though he pretended not to see the plants he'd stolen over the past 2 days, Briar reddened. What's a pity? Magic Circle Temple has the finest gardens and gardeners, north of the Pebbled Sea. People who know more than I about plants from all over the world. Nico cut some fish for himself, put it in his mouth and chewed it carefully, without looking at his companion. When he'd swallowed, he added, "It's also one of the 2 great schools of magic north of the Pebbled Sea. I studied at Lightsbridge, the University for Mages, but in some ways I find the mages at Winding Circle more open-minded." "Oh, magic? Who cares?" Briar dug into his food, refusing to talk more until it was in his belly where no one could take it from him. "Plants from all over the world? What must that be like?" "I believe there is a dedicate at Winding Circle who has been able to grow vegetables and fruit, even trees, inside a building," Nico remarked. He wasn't even looking at Briar, but at the view of the seashore from the inn's window. Briar just couldn't imagine it. "One thing that I really feel I must say," Nico put greens on the boy's plate. "If I'm forced to bribe hostlers at night to help you bathe, that means less money for food like this as we travel." Briar glared at him. If Nico saw the dirty look, he chose to ignore it. Instead, he returned to eating his dinner. "I'll stick as far as the border," thought the boy. "Get a few more meals like this under my belt, so I'd better try this washing. After that, we'll see. Maybe I'll have a look at this Winding Circle place. Maybe I won't." The Pebbled Sea, off Caption. Their first night out, the captain invited Tris and Nico to share the evening meal with the officers. The captain himself was delayed, which gave Tris a chance to examine an odd display on the wall near his map table. It looked to be a collection of knots tied in thick cords, each hanging from a single nail. She counted 2 in green, 1 in yellow, 1 in blue, a 5th that was green with a thin yellow strand in it, and a 6th green with a blue thread. About to touch them, she changed her mind. They seemed to shimmer, promising a scare to anyone rash enough to handle them. "There's my treasure, little girl," the captain had come in. "Fortune in winds, that is." Tris pushed her glasses higher on her nose. "I don't understand." "It's the work of Mimanders, trader mages," he explained. "For a small fortune they'll take a cord and tie a bit of wind up into it for you. See, it's green for north, yellow for east, red for south, blue for west, just like they do it in the Living Circle temples. Them's for blowing us all the way out of any tight spots. And I got one for northwest and one for northeast. Those'll blow me to safe harbor in Emelon, if ever we need it." He ushered Tris to her chair. "People can tie up a wind with a knot?" she asked, eyeing him sharply. "You're telling me a tale." "It's a tale I paid for in gold," the man replied, forking slices of ham onto his plate. "Pass Master Nico the bread. There's a good girl." She ate quietly, paying little attention to the men's talk. The knots occupied her mind. How could anyone tie up wind in a knotted cord? Was it an easy thing to learn or hard? She'd never heard of it before. Was it a thing only traders knew? As the first mate filled their cups, she saw that Nico was watching her. Again, those large black eyes gave no clue as to what he thought. Why did the man have to stare so? She wondered. Didn't his mother teach him it was rude? "Why don't you ask me anything?" she demanded abruptly. "If you've something on your mind, tell me." Nico's eyelids fluttered. Was he laughing at her? "I can't," he told her, tearing a piece from a sheet of flatbread. "Any questions I have might limit how you think and the way you act on your thoughts. You see, Tris, just now your mind is unformed, without prejudices. If I present you with the wrong ideas, they might restrict what's inside you." She thought about that for a few moments, ignoring the smiles of the ship's officers. "That makes no sense whatsoever," she replied at last. "I'd like an answer that makes sense, if you please." "Not yet. We have to get to know each other better." "That's just his way, youngster," the captain explained, passing a dish of olives to Tris. She muttered her thanks and took some. "Master Nico, he's as hard to understand sometimes as any oracle. When the fit's on him, he can talk you so confused you'll forget which bearing it's north." "It's the university education," Nico told them. "It teaches us to chase our tails for an hour before breakfast, just to get the exercise." "University?" Tris inquired, interested in spite of herself. "Some of my cousins are at universities. Which one did you go to?" After a moment's hesitation, Nico answered, "Lightsbridge in Kerrang." Tris shoved an olive round her plate. "My cousin Amory studies there. He's to be a mage. Maybe you know him. Amory Chandler?" "I haven't been there in 5 years," was the answer. "Chances are that I don't." He poured fresh pomegranate juice for her, then said, "Would you like to be a mage yourself?" How could he keep taunting her this way, suggesting she could have the one thing she knew that she didn't? No! I hate mages. They confuse people. Jumping up, Tris ran out of the cabin. Alone on deck, she heard thunder growl in the distance. The storm that had threatened all day was breaking. Darting over to the rail, she turned up her face just as a tall wave slapped the ship. She was immediately soaked, and her anger washed away. Shaking water from her spectacles, she wondered how it was that she felt queasy in her cabin, but perfectly fine now with the deck jumping under her feet. It must be the smell, she decided. The cabin smells like all the cargoes these people have ever carried, and maybe some extra. Here she felt wonderful. Nature roared and thrashed around her, making her rages and tears alike seem meaningless. It was grand to let them go, if only for the time spent out in the weather. Looking at the choppy seas before her, she noticed dim shadows cast on the white-capped water. Where did the light come from? Even the torches wouldn't burn in this. Turning, she saw nothing at eye level, but something bright drew her attention up the length of the main mast. There, at the top, dim light balanced on the wood. It had to be Ranog's fire, the ghostly flame that seamen believed was the lamp of the water god, leading Ranog to bless good ships or to sink bad ones. Shimmering, the light reached an arm along the topmost yard, until she could see a glowing cross high overhead. A globe of fire leapt to another mast, clinging to its top. Tris laughed gleefully at the wonder before her. As if it were a living thing drawn to the sound, the light trickled down both masts in glowing streaks, abandoning the upper reaches of the masts. Once it was close to the deck, it turned into balls the size of her head and jumped free. Unthinkingly, Tris held out both hands, palm-ups, and caught the globes. Her skin prickled. Each hair on her head rose. Her wool shawl gave off sparks. Then Ranog's fire went out, leaving her to be just plain Tris again, with hair that frizzed even worse now, standing on end. She pawed at it in vain, trying to brush it flat before anyone came and saw. A hand thrust a comb in front of her nose. Turning, she glared at Nico. "I suppose you were watching. You told me yourself that's what I always do," he reminded her. "And in a sense you are right. I am always watching, though not for the reasons that you appear to expect." "Do you see a monster like everyone else does?" she demanded, struggling to yank the comb through her bristling hair. "Am I someone who ought to be locked away?" Coming over, he put a hand on her shoulder. "I see a young girl who has been very badly treated." Try as she might, Tris could hear no pity in his voice. If she had, she might have struck him. "Anything that Winding Circle has to offer will be an improvement on what you've had so far." She thrust the comb into his hands and broke out of his light hold. "I need my brush," she informed him, and went below. Inside her cabin, she sank down on the pile of her luggage, trembling. She knew it was stupid to hope that he was right. Her hopes always got destroyed, but she couldn't help it. Maybe Ranog's fire was a sign that she was right to hope.